Greetings from my studio kitchen in San Francisco, and welcome to BRC and Friends, a regular-ish 30-minute Google Hangout with me, Bruce Reyes-Chow, where I chat with friends and adventurers from around the interwebs. Today, I welcome to the show public relations professional, gaming expert, and 49'ers fan, Michael Beadle, who also happens to be my brother-in-law. So welcome, Michael. And we'll call you Beadle from now on out, because that's how most of us know him. Beadle works as the Associate Director of Public Relations for Ubisoft, a leading video game company. He helps with public relation campaigns to launch video games, corporate communications, Ubisoft Motion Pictures, and oversees a team of 7. He likes to talk about how public relations and communications has become an influential, valuable, and powerful skill set in today's 24-hour news cycle, social media landscape for individuals, corporations, and of all shapes and sizes. Now, before we jump in, please take a moment to check out all the links below that I've posted. It has everything connected to Beadle and myself, so you can share the video. Feel free to tweet along with us at brcandfriends or at BDLJUCE. And use the hashtag BRC and Friends. If things are working, you might be able to chat with us a little bit during the live show, but I know most of you are probably watching this after we've already taped it. As usual, our time is broken up into 3 segments. The first will be centered around the interests and passions of my guest, the second around a current event or 2, and finally some last words where I ask a few very random questions. So we're going to get started. So Beadle is a public relations professional. Can you first, just define what that is? You know, we hear a lot, I'm a PR guy or I'm a marketing person, but how do you describe what it means to be a public relations? I mean, you studied it and you have a degree and all those kind of things. How do you define it?
I define it as somebody, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
It's good to have you on.
It's a great honor. So public relations, I have been in the field for quite some time now, and I really feel it's about communicating on behalf of an organization, a company, people, and sharing information that needs to be disseminated through a larger audience, oftentimes through either social media, through your own company, or through folks like gatekeepers as journalists and other types of influencers.
Right. So you and I are not way apart in age, and so we've seen over the last decade. How long have you been in PR now at this point?
I've been in public relations for, let's see, 16 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Something crazy like that. Yeah, I'm old.
Right, so you've seen a lot change, right? We've seen this onset of all this crazy internet stuff and Facebook and Twitter and all that. How has social media kind of changed the way communication, PR has worked? Is it just another mechanism for delivery, or kind of has it changed the landscape of it, or a little of both? How have you been able to adapt over the last almost 2 decades now of your work in PR?
Yeah, social media is really a huge paradigm shift. With public relations previously, you would have companies such as the ones I've worked in the past, whether they be PR agencies or Ubisoft as I work now, and you would work directly with journalists who there's a certain journalistic integrity and certain rules that we both abide by. My degree is in journalism. Public relations is the option. So what we would be able to do is we work with journalists to formulate stories, to talk about our products, to talk about if you're doing public policy, for in political landscapes, or if you're doing things in regard to maybe a nonprofit organization, and sharing those messages and what you want to get out to the public through journalists and the gateway. Social media has changed that in a lot of ways, because instead of having kind of a one-to-many landscape of you speaking to a journalist and then them speaking to their audience through their filter and their lens, now we still work with those lovely folks. However, social media, so people can speak back to you directly as an entity, as an individual, as a company. And that has changed things so quickly because of the speed as well. So something happens in your industry or happens in the world, and the first place people go is Twitter. Right. You find out the good, the bad. You have to then disseminate and decipher what's real, what's not. then usually people go to a news source or look for the tweets from those news sources to find out, okay, what happened? For example, there's an earthquake, last month here in the Bay Area, and everybody was on Twitter immediately, making sure people were okay, checking with friends. Where was it? How big was it? Was there damage? So it can be a very powerful tool, and that has changed also for public relations professionals to realize how are we engaging our audiences, both directly as well as within the landscape of working with journalists as we continue to do, and our own kind of owned media, meaning that corporations have their own YouTube accounts, their own Facebook accounts, Twitter, Instagram, all those sorts of nuances in the social media landscape. And it's all about, where you want to put that focus, what kind of resources you have, and how much you're able to, I guess, responsible for the various channels. Some folks, as you see, when things go bad, they pull things or they run and hide. It definitely has changed the public's perception on corporations and individuals. We've seen it day in and day out in the media landscape.
Right. Well, and you're working in the industry of gaming, which takes on a lot of like technology, but may or may not be social. I mean, it's just a very interesting thing, and I stumble around that because I gave up video games as soon as they came into the house. Like I was the guy who rode his bike down to the arcade to Time Zone in downtown Sacramento and play Galaga, and I can't pass up a Galaga machine now without popping a few quarters in. But it's that world has just changed. For us non-gaming people who are watching all of this happen, because that's your industry right now. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how that has changed too? I mean, you got the PR stuff, and you're doing it in the gaming world. How has gaming changed over the last, let's just say, 15 years? I mean, what's been going on?
Sure. I think there's been a very dynamic shift, and the numbers have proven this. And this isn't just PR speak. You have to trust me on this one. The video game industry has definitely grown in terms of scope and scale. So people, as you said, 15 years ago, who were playing N64 and PlayStation 2, transitioned into Xbox and PlayStation 3, and now we have the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and you have new potential virtual reality types of gaming devices and things like that coming up. You have the proliferation of handheld gaming. So you have from Game Boy back in the day, I'm sure you might have had one, to now everybody's phone can play a game. So right. I think what that's done is that has allowed the ability for people to play games, increase the install base. So if you don't own a console, you can still play a game. If you own one or two consoles, you have kind of the interactive space and entertainment at your fingertips. You can play online, where social becomes a big component of playing games. I enjoy playing everything from Madden to Assassin's Creed to I love playing games with my daughters, like Just Dance, which is great, and you can play both, in front of your TV with just your family who's there immediately, or you can play online and join like the World Dance Floor and play with thousands of others in the Just Dance. It was really fun. So I don't know if that answers exactly, but
let me ask. So I could, if I want, like we could go set up Just Dance, and we could Just Dance with your family.
Yeah, you could if we had the right setup.
Why haven't we done that yet? I don't understand.
I don't know. I think the funny thing is it's the great thing is it's what you want. If you want to play against somebody or with somebody online, that's one aspect of entertainment you can do, which you can't quite do with the book or with music quite the same, or with movies. But with video games, you can have this interactive multiplayer co-op experience, both online if necessary, or you can have it just in your own house and just sit around and pass the controller around, take turns trying to beat a level.
Yeah. So what's coming up next? We're gonna get off of gaming and PR in a minute, but as much as you can tell us without having to, take me out, what should we be looking for? If you're a gaming person, you're like, oh, Michael Beadle's on, he's gonna talk about gaming. If you're looking out 5-10 years, what are the things that you think may be coming, or would get gamers excited right now? What's coming up?
Well, I think what we're entering now in the next, 3 or 4 years, especially, is what I think is a great sweet spot for the industry, in that you have these consoles with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, which are really super souped up computers, which are their capabilities are amazing. The graphics are stunning. The game engines that run the games, that are the backbone of the games, are continuing to become these phenomenal tech creations and innovative opportunities for people to tell stories. For example, Ubisoft has a game this past year that launched in, I believe it was May, June timeframe, called Watch Dogs, and it sold really well. And it was a next-gen game. It really kind of took advantage of a lot of the new features that the system has, each of the systems. So, I think innovation is the big key. I'd mentioned kind of the virtual headset stuff. We have the Oculus Rift. We have the Sony Morpheus. Who knows? If those are going to take off. We've seen things like that in the past be launched and maybe not meet consumer demand, but I think that there's an opportunity for it. People want something different and new, and that's one thing I really impress upon folks is our industry is going to always continue to evolve. If you've seen a movie, which movies are great, and we're getting into that space as well, but a movie is something you sit down, you watch, and you experience in the same way you have, maybe it's 3D, so you put some glasses on, maybe you have 4D and the thing moves around and you can smell something,
Right.
but ultimately it's the same type of experience. In video games, this interactive and multiplayer and social experience is what I think the future is going to be looking like.
Right. So someday, I mean, I can imagine someday we're going to walk into a movie theater and be actually in the movie. Like something's going to recognize us as we're moving around, and we're actually in it doing things.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, the truth is and it's fun to see this at times. There are some games that come pretty darn close, and so the movie screen experience. And that type of entertainment you're right, could change dynamically. Part of it just depends on kind of what players want and what they feel would be exciting. For example, I'm sure you've had this experience at a movie theater. You go in there, please turn your cell phones off. Somebody's cell phone goes off. Somebody has, or is reading all their text messages. You see that bright screen in the front. And you're like, that's not how I want to experience this movie, right?
Right.
Maybe you don't care. But in a gaming sense, you're like, well, I don't want to experience that in my game experience. So I play by myself, or I only play with people I know. So there's a little bit of that dynamic, I think, that will need to be addressed. But sure, if everybody put on a headset and you couldn't hear anybody, and they had a virtual thing, then maybe it's a little, more like Captain EO in a different way, right?
Captain EO, you just aged yourself. People are like, we're gonna have to Google that. Who's Captain EO? So yeah, let's jump off of that. So thanks for filling. I think. There's a lot of us that we just kind of hear about both PR and gaming, and we don't really know what any of them are, but so that's been very helpful. But let's jump on to some new things. So I want to talk to you a little bit. So the first way that you and I met, if you remember, obviously you do, is you came to the church I was pastoring, and I've always been very conscious of your ability to kind of be a person of faith. In all aspects of your life, right? You're not just Sunday morning, I'm a good person here, and then you go out and you're a crazy person in the rest of the world. I also don't get a sense that when you're at work, you're like telling everybody about Jesus all the time. Like that's not your style and not kind of who I've known you to be. So for those who kind of are people of faith, are Christian, but work in very secular industries, how do you balance that? How do you deal? I mean, how do you live that? Which seems so easily. I know it's not always, but how do you manage to kind of integrate the two?
That's a great question. I remember my father asked a long time ago when I was working at a PR agency and an internship. was explaining to him what we were doing on this particular account, and it was an alcohol account, and my father was the president of the SAD program, Students Against Drunk Driving, and I was like, that's a great question. Kind of put me in check to say, I didn't quite think of it that way. And then I went back into work and I brainstormed ways of how could we be more responsible in still getting the message across of, hey, we think it's okay to drink, it's okay to enjoy this if that's your choice, but do so responsibly, do so in a way that's going to make sure that you and the lives that you love and other people out there are going to be able to continue to experience life, to be honest. And so I kind of kept that with me in what I do today. For example, the Just Dance brand is a great example where it's about dancing, it's about fun. One of the ideas that I had was putting it in schools to help supplement PE programs, which is great. So I think that, the part for me, for the faith part, would be trying to make sure that we're not doing things that would be, exploitive, crass, crude, rude, I guess. I want to always be able to feel proud of the work that I've done. Now, there are times when it becomes challenging and kind of intriguing when you hit those kind of gray areas. And I've struggled on occasion. I haven't always made the right decisions. But at the same time, I feel that ultimately, like you had shared, like I am the same person. And so I think that for me, people know that that's kind of where I come from. And they, I've had folks ask me about that in the past, and I'm more than happy to talk, but I don't want to, as you said, just want to do it in a way that's authentic, I guess.
Right. Well, I think that's really, once they build a relationship with you or any of us, and then they almost kind of like, oh, and you're a church person, you become a safe person to talk about faith with, I think is a real gift. So, okay, so let's move on to something that maybe you're not quite as calm about. And part of the show really is to kind of get a person on and let folks see that none of us is as one-dimensional as we all like to think each other are, and so all these different pieces fall into place. So you are a Niners fan.
Yes.
And so I saw your Facebook post today around your suggestions for Coach Harbaugh and the 49'ers. So they're not doing well, and it seems like if you could just keep the first halves of these last two games, we'd be awesome. And then it's the second half. We're done. So tell me a little bit, how are the Niners doing this year, and why do you think they're doing however you think they're doing?
Great question. You hit me really hard because after the last two games, a Niners season ticket holder, diehard fan, actually was there walking out of the stadium when they lost the Super Bowl to the Ravens a few years back. Ugh. So, I think that this year they have a great team. They really, really do. It's discipline. I think some of it's coaching and combination of both. They're really hurting themselves in areas that are, I think, pretty easily preventable. It's situational. You're a big baseball fan, Bruce. You know this. You got a guy on first, less than 2 outs. You got to move him over, right? So, hey, 3rd and long. If you're a cornerback, don't grab him. Don't touch him. You have the chance to get off the field and get your offense out there. Don't make a dumb play. So I think some of it's mental, and it's not for lack of effort. I think some of it is a little bit on the offensive side of the defenses adjust to us, and then we don't make enough adjustments in the second half to. It's not like we need to score the same amount of points. We just need to keep our defense off the field and just keep some drives and run the ball a little bit more. Frank Gore, one of my favorite players. Come on, give him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually been really surprised how undisciplined they've been. I mean, the penalties that have been hit this year have all been like emotional penalties, and I'm like, that's not okay. Like that doesn't seem like what a Harbaugh team would be, right? That they would be hard-nosed, disciplined, control their emotions. But there are a couple of like 2 right in a row, and you're 30 yards back. I mean, it's got to be aggravating.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think one of the things early on in Harbaugh's reign as coach was he knew early on he had a team that was pretty good, but they needed to learn how to, in the 3 years prior to Harbaugh arriving, really hurt themselves by penalties, by dumb mistakes, by throwing the ball into the hands of the other team instead of throwing it away. Those types of things. And for whatever reason, I think that they're being a little too loose. They're not focused in those disciplinary spots where they need to say, look, we have the ability to control the game. We need to go out and do that when and where we see fit and dictate that. And I think a lot of it starts with the offensive line and running the ball and keeping folks off balance. To be honest, one of the things that I really respect and appreciate is that the Niners and the Seahawks, very similar teams, very similar formulas for success, and I think the Niners need to get back to that a little bit more. Running the ball, being smart on defense, and I think they'll win more than they'll lose if they stick to that formula.
Yeah, I had this crazy thought when I was watching. I'm like, they look like the Raiders, which is not a compliment.
That's not good. That's not good. And that's the thing and it's funny because, you don't go up by that many points and then just lose when you're a team that's built like this. Like you really do make the mistakes to give them the opportunity to climb back in.
Yeah.
Really foolish.
Yeah. I was actually on an airplane watching the game. And when you're the only one watching the game, you're like, you're just making hand gestures, and nobody knows what you're looking at. And then it was quite fun. Anyway, all right. So amazingly, we've reached the end of our time already. It's been a quick half hour, and so I have 4 questions for you, and then I want you to plug an organization that you want people to know about. But here, you don't have to give any explanation for these. These are just random questions, that kind of like Actors Studio. So here's your first one. Baseball players have walk-up music, right? What's your walk-up music, your walk-up song?
My walk-up song would probably be my favorite hip-hop song of all time. That's Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim.
Wow. It takes two to make... No, not them, sorry. All right, So one food that you just don't understand.
One food that I just don't understand. That's a good one. I really like food, but I'm probably gonna have to go with cranberries. Not a big fan.
You don't have to explain. All right, here's a good favorite sports team that is not baseball or football.
Ooh, again, good question. Well, being in the Bay Area, I'm gonna have to go the Warriors. I think they're a fun team to watch. They're young. They should be a contender this year with Steve Kerr as the new head coach. So we'll see where that goes.
Cool. And your last random question: who will be cast as you in the Michael Beadle life story?
If he still looks as young as he does now, probably Mario Lopez or John Leguizamo. I don't know, one of the two.
Very different people, but that should be fun. All right, pay it forward. One organization that you want people to know more about.
That's a great one. I probably want folks to just know about. Their local food banks. To be honest, it's we're on the web. Talking about social media, that go and check it out and see how they can donate or contribute or maybe even go in person.
Great. Thank you. And I'll include some links in the recap of some local food banks in the Bay Area towns in which we live. All right, so thanks for tuning in to this episode of BRC and Friends. Thanks again, Beadle, for hanging out today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Please take a moment, you all, to subscribe to the YouTube channel. There should be a box showing up around here somewhere in the recorded version. Share this episode with your friends, and be sure to connect with Beadle as well as myself again in all the links below. So until next time on BRC and Friends, please keep talking to each other because there are times when silence is an option. We'll see you next time.